Hello, everyone. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and welcome to the Incredibuild Virtual Roundtable. My name is Yohai West, and I'm super excited to be your host for today's event. I have the privilege of working at Incredibuild, helping thousands of companies across the industry accelerate their software development cycles hassle-free. Looking back at this crazy year, we have witnessed an unprecedented acceleration. In fact, Deloitte has officially called 2020 the year of acceleration. We have seen companies accelerate their transformation to become more agile, release faster and automatically, and develop more in the cloud. Taking a look at the game dev industry, we have customers who are able to accelerate transformation and release new games to market amidst major disruptions. One of the most memorable for me was Milestone, who reached their population with the new racing game when Italy became the epicenter of the pandemic. And this is why we have launched a series of virtual roundtables to accelerate ideas sharing, bringing together our ecosystem of partners and thought leaders to share how this acceleration has influenced their strategies. Today's virtual roundtable will be focused on the future of C++ dev environments. To get started, a quick question. All right, what percentage of C++ in your organization, what is the percentage of development in your organization is C++? So I'll give all you guys just a quick second to fill out this poll for us, and we will continue. Okay. So to get started, we are going to now jump right into the introductions. But before we do that, just a few housekeeping rules. First, everyone will be muted, and that doesn't mean that you won't have a voice. We encourage you to post your questions in the Q&A on the fly as they come up, and we will hopefully address them towards the end of the event. At the end of the event, you will receive a short survey that will really help us fine-tune the topics for the upcoming virtual events. Okay, let's jump right into it and start with the short introduction of our virtual roundtable. Hey, Brad, do you mind going first, giving yourself a quick introduction, and then we'll go on to Nick, and then we'll move over to Diego, and then to Dori.
Thanks. Yeah, so it's CTO Perforce, Brad Hart. I drive our product strategy. Really sort of setting the vision. I work with our product management team to enable that vision, and also with our sales engineering folks, really to drive and tie the go-to-market of our product vision and strategy out to our customers.
I'm Nick. I'm a product manager on the Microsoft Visual Studio team, specifically for the C++ experience. So my job is all around finding ways that we can improve developer productivity within Visual Studio, and then I also work with people that are on the VS Code team, VC package team, and I'm also the product manager for the C++ side of code spaces, which we will get into later.
Hello, I'm Diego. I think I'm next. So I'm one of the co-founders of Conan, C++ package manager, since 5 years ago. And like 4 years ago, I joined JFrog. And since then, I've been serving there as the lead architect and leader of the Conan project there, and also as a C++ advocate, C++ community advocate.
Hey all, my name is Dori. I'm the CTO of Incredibuild, working in helping you get your time back, working on strategy and directing the roadmap of Incredibuild to make sure that we help everyone, C++, development community, and others, to not waste a single minute if they don't need to.
Excellent. Thank you so much for those quick introductions, and let's get started. So we have prepared a number of intriguing questions for our panel members, and we will, I will start by asking the questions, and then we'll give our chance to the panelists to reply. So the first, just to get ourselves started, I'd like to ask the panel. Basically, what I opened with it was the transformation, and this transformation has accelerated this past year. So the question for you guys is, where will the working environment trends of C++ developers take us in the next 5 years? Nick, why don't you start us off with that one?
Sure. Also, I think someone mentioned that they missed my last name. It's Uhlenhuth, but it's kind of impossible to spell, so sorry. Maybe Google it. I don't know. But when we look at the trends of C++ developers' working environments over the next 5 years, I think we're going to continue to see a shift to the cloud. So many C++ developers currently are hooked to CI/CD pipelines, which is continuous integration, continuous deployment pipelines that are used to automate things like building and testing and deployment of their code bases. And that's great because that means developers are committing code more often because it'll run tests for them, it'll build their code, and that means their commit sizes are smaller. So when the test does fail, they're able to diagnose that hopefully sooner because there's fewer changes. And those CI/CD pipelines can be hosted in the cloud, which is awesome because then you don't have to have these really powerful clusters locally that can be in the cloud, and you can access that from anywhere and take advantage of that pipeline. But then when we're looking at trends, sort of the next step further is to use cloud-hosted VMs. And so with C++, a lot of cross-platform developers can be on a local Windows machine, but they're targeting a Linux VM that's hosted, for example, in the cloud. And then if you take that a step further, rather than just targeting a VM, you can actually do your development work within a cloud-hosted VM with things like Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure, for example. And so you're doing your development work in a cloud-hosted VM. And so that transitions into this next point I want to bring up, where sort of a variation on that, where you're connected to a remote development environment, but you're connecting to it through a local thin client. So this is the approach that you see with VS Code Remote. You have Visual Studio Code running on your machine, but it's just the thin dev client there. So your local machine is only responsible for hosting the cloud UI, or the cloud UI, the VS Code UI, but all the compute intensive tasks like building and debugging happens in the cloud. And so that's awesome because it greatly expands the flexibility you have with the devices you're able to code from. You no longer need super powerful machines for that. And so this trend, I think, is going to continue even further. And what GitHub Codespaces is doing, it takes that approach of the thin dev client, but it moves that client into a browser. And so that gives you even more flexibility from the devices that you can actually meaningfully contribute from. You could open up VS Code in a browser on like an iPad, for example. Anything that's able to run a browser, you're able to be just as productive as if you were on a really beefy desktop machine. So you open up your browser, it has VS Code in it, and you connect to your online environment that's hosted in the cloud. And I think when we look at the next 5 years, this shift to the cloud and moving everything to the cloud is going to continue because it just has obvious benefits for things like remote work, ease of access, and like I was saying, with resource flexibility. So that's sort of my spiel for the next 5 years where I think things will go.
All right, thank you, Nick, for that. Hey, Brad, do you want to take anything to add on to that, or Diego?
Yeah, sure. So, I completely agree with everything Nick said. We're seeing that at our customers, and in our gaming customers and semiconductor customers, they're also dealing with a large element of scale, right? And certainly the cloud transition helps people to ramp resources that are necessary. For example, some of our gaming customers, right? All the largest studios use Perforce because the data is so big and the number of files are so big, and that's kind of what we're geared toward is, handling all these dimensions of scale. But the interesting challenge that people went through this year was, how do I do this from home, right? We have a number of customers that were sort of forward thinking and started to build not only their server and their infrastructure, their build infrastructure in the cloud, but, as Nick mentioned, the actual user environment. So these virtualized workstations are being built so that, and again, if you think in the gaming industry, not only do they have to deal with lots of, files and IDEs, but they're dealing with huge assets. They're dealing with a bunch of different, graphical editors, renderers, et cetera. And so what some of these companies have been able to do, and I think the trend is going to continue throughout the rest of the industry, is take all that infrastructure, not only for the server base, but take it and put it for the developer's virtual environment into the cloud. And they're federating across multiple clouds just to give them the flexibility to turn things up, turn them down, and get people ramped quickly. So it's I see it was an initiative that had started but has been accelerated over the course of this year. So we've been working closely with, really, you're seeing that in the gaming and semiconductor environment. So really it's all about scale, going fast, and providing people the ability to turn up and down resources as necessary.
Excellent, Brad. Thank you. Diego?
Yeah, well, I agree with that this is happening. I also raise the concerns that are saying in the chat, because first, I think this is happening, but this is going slower than probably most other programming technologies, like web technologies and everything. I think there are a few reasons. For example, C++, as Brad said, is huge. And the assets, the build time, everything is bigger. And then the build, when you move to the cloud, is bigger. I'm still seeing a lot of people buying more and more beefy hardware in-house. So they are buying the latest processors and everything to build things as huge as, I don't know, LLVM, Clang, Qt, Boost, Chromium, and they really want their local experience. I still see this happening way more than any other technology. So I agree that this is happening, but I wonder about the speed. It is accelerating as well. I agree with that as well. Which is the amount of acceleration? Where will it be in 5 years? I have my concerns. I think it will grow, but it will probably not be that mainstream compared with other technologies.
I think that we all agree that the trend is there. It's just a matter of when it will hit, the large numbers. And I think that once the trend will be there in masses, I think that the next thing, and we already see that with our customers pioneering in the cloud, next thing is a concern about pricing, about costs, about performance, about, you don't want to pay for a 64-core build machine that's just working with 32-core or 4-core for half of the time. So you want to utilize everything very smartly. So I think that, and also, when we're looking at customers that are having, hardware at on-premise, they still in times want to scale to the cloud for additional compute power, such in the way that Incredibuild offer them. So I think that this trend, the cloud trend, is there. It's going to accelerate, and it's going to require additional handling of costs, of pricing, of utilization, of seamlessness. All these things are going to come with that as well. So I think that it was very, very. It was easily, we could all see that the cloud transition is here during COVID, etc. But I think that when I'm looking at the world of C++ development, I think that there are a few additional trends that we can see. I think in the last survey that was published by the Standard C++ Foundation, very interesting survey, developers pointed out still their main pain points are still around slow build times, managing third-party libraries, and slow setting up of dev and CICD environments. These are the concerns of the development, while C-levels people, CTO, dev managers are highly concerned about moving dev to the public cloud, fully automated agile and CI/CD processes, and many of them are struggling the technical depth of testing. And I think that if we're looking at the future C++ working environment, of course, we'll see IDE in the cloud, we'll see remote builds and additional cloud services that will make development, deployment, and monitoring faster and more seamless. But I think the testing is going to take a large part of the trends that we are going to see in C++, because continuous delivery is here. In order to have continuous delivery, you must have full test coverage. And full test coverage comes with a price. Many companies have technical debt. So I think that new technologies around covering this technical debt, for example, a new startup company, DiffBlue, is just launched an AI-based test generation for Java. I think it will take some more time to see that in C++, but I envision a world in 5 years from now that you'll probably work on a cloud IDE, or at least connected to a cloud dev or build service. You'll get many artificial intelligence hints while writing your code, whether it's vulnerability hints, code snippets, and other suggestions. AI services will probably generate and execute unit tests while you write your code. And the feedback to your operator of everything that you do will be super fast. No one will believe that 5 years ago, developers waited 10 minutes for their C++ build to complete. And taking that with low code and no code services and all these things, I think this is where we're heading.
Another thing I wanted to bring out too as a trend is, the C++ developers, they in today's world can't develop in isolation, right, in a silo. So in the gaming industry, they're also dealing with the art and the visual assets that have to be tested together, built together, approved to go through the workflow together, embedded software and hardware, right? So the C++ developers now have to coordinate with the hardware teams, right? Things are being released. Velocity has to increase. Reuse has to increase. So it's really no longer, I'm really seeing a major trend where these teams are working and collaborating together to deliver a product synchronously. So it does force a shift in the mentality from an individual scope to looking at the bigger picture. And there's a lot of opportunity for products. Certainly it's an area of work where we are focused on, but for transformation in the industry to help make this sort of cross collaboration across these teams easier.
Yeah, thanks, Brad, for that. And thank you, Diego, for posting the survey that Dori had mentioned. And I think that it's also a good segue. Dori mentioned testing. So I wanted to talk about our favorite topic of testing. With all the hype around AI and automation, testing, and also the rise of DevSecOps, I wanted to ask you all, the panel, how do you all think the shift left trend will affect the C++ developers' work? Diego, do you want to maybe kick us off with that one?
Yeah, why not? So first, in this sense, in testing, we have been delayed compared with other technologies. So we were relying on the compiler and the typing system as our testing integration for the last decades. Now we are catching up. But there is still a lot of space to go. And in this sense, I think the major trend here in the shift left strategy will be adopting the tools that we already have. So we have sanitizers and we have fuzzers, for example. At the moment, I think around 60% of C++ development, based on that survey, and also in the JetBrains ecosystem survey is really interesting as well. I think 60% of the C++ developers, they are not even using those tools. So I think integrating those tools into the flow and everything will be one of the important things in this shift left. And this can only happen if we are able to speed up the build times. So we can only add more things to the pipeline if we can build faster, and then we will have more times to sanitize and to fast also our inputs. For the artificial intelligence, and I am a bit more skeptical. I think there's still a long road to get there, but we have plenty of tools, and I think this is what will happen in the next years regarding testing.
Thanks, Diego. And I think you're being consistent with the skepticism for the next couple of years. So I'm glad that stick with you. Next, Nick or Brad, if you guys want to take a stab at this.
Sure. So one of the things that I've seen, and sure, the shift left movement's been out there for a while, and the trend is there. The value is obvious. I mean, it's exponentially more expensive to fix a defect if it gets out to your customer base than it is to fix it in dev. And we're seeing more than just the functional testing, right? Do some quick smoke tests as part of your CI builds, all that. We're starting to see performance and security move its way left, right? It's no longer a release gate item. And that's where you need tools like our QAC product, right? That does static code analysis. That's where you need to develop tests that will help you have an always green environment. That's one of I think the areas where people with shift left testing fall down. And I spent a lot of time with this when I worked with our Perfecto brand, is developing a test framework that is robust and reliable, because when people try to run tests, whether they be static code analysis or functional tests, what have you, if the tests are flaky, if the tests themselves don't provide a level of confidence, then it's always going to fail. These shift left efforts will fall down and people will abandon them. So it's really, you need to have a focus on writing good quality, robust tests. Green is green, red means something's wrong, not it was a flaky test, let's try to rerun it. So I think from the functional side, people have been pushing for it hard. I think a lot of people that I have seen and personally talked to have fallen down, again, because of their test frameworks have not been stable. But now we're starting to see here more and more, especially in today's world, security, performance. Those tests are now starting to move instead of end of cycle in the daily CICD process. So it's a big trend. It's a challenge, right? And a lot of companies are working hard to try to address that.
Thanks, Brad. Nick, you want to chime in with anything?
Yeah. I mean, I echo a lot of what Brad just said. Like, we're seeing those same shifts as well. And recently in Visual Studio, we added support for ASAN, so like address sanitizer for targeting Linux, and also for Windows for MS Build and for CMake projects. So that's something that we're actively trying to keep up with the trends on. And then also he mentioned static code analysis. So we're always adding more of those features into the IDE, sort of like what Diego was saying, like a lot of these tools kind of exist, but if you don't integrate it nicely, then a lot of people won't use them. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to stay on pace with that. And so we've also been working on linters. We've added quite a few linters to the Visual Studio experience, and those can actually run faster than background code analysis because they're built on the existing IntelliSense capabilities. But one thing I do want to say, like with background code analysis, like that'll catch a lot more things than our linters will catch right now, because we specifically are choosing linters that can run quickly. But background code analysis can catch a lot of problems before you have to write tests and things like that. And so it is important to run. And so when we talked earlier about the shift to the cloud, you could imagine things like background code analysis, those compute tasks can be offloaded away from your local machine. So you can get the advantage of that without having to bog down your local resources and your local performance. So that's just one other thing I wanted to point out there. And then the last point on shift left, because when I think of shift left, I think of like saving time for developers, or like reducing steps in their workflow and things like that. And so just to make the GitHub Codespaces point on that aspect, with GitHub Codespaces, the fact that you can open it in a browser, that can really shift left the whole like PR review process. You just go to GitHub, you see a repository, you see the PR request, the PR that you need to review, you just click open in Codespace, and then it opens that code base directly in your browser. You don't have to worry about cloning and setting up your local environment or anything. You just open directly from that PR, and you're able to navigate through the code using all the typical code navigation, things like that. So it really reduces the number of steps that are needed and the setup that's needed to do something like a PR review. I think that was all my talking points for that.
Yeah, I have one more quick one, and I wanted to, because I've seen this a lot, right? Everybody knows the value of open source, right? And the whole point of open source is if there's something that you can use and it's built by somebody else and it's good, save time, bring it in and focus on your, your value add, right? But we have also seen that people have struggled with open source. And that's why we have our SourcePro product line, right? Which is, a library of embeddable C++ components that are already performant, secure, and they're very portable. So that's, we have a lot of success with customers so that they can start off with the foundation, some building blocks that are fully supported out of the gate, and they can focus on their velocity of building their unique value add. So it's, again, there's always been a massive trend towards using open source, but it can, in some cases, slow people down. But the value of starting on a known base that's tested and reliable, it's another way to increase velocity, because it's all about increasing velocity, right? Improving quality, increasing velocity, that's what shift left is all about, so people can just focus on value add and get it to the market quickly.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys, for that. And with that, I'd like to kind of transition into a trend, but like it's opposing trends. The trend, on the one hand, we have code inflation, right? A lot more coming in. But on the other hand, we have the demand for speed. And in other words, how could the industry cope with surging code inflation while staying agile is the question. And I'd like to call on my colleague, Dori, to kick us off with that one.
So I believe that there's no doubt that development cycles in the next years will only require more compute power. And continuous integration and DevSecOps trends mean that investment in extensive test coverage, code analysis, and other quality steps is something that's going to happen. And this is already a huge problem in organization, which we're able to address this test in technical depth. just to step into this, opposing trend, just to step into the next problem it entails, very slow build times. For example, we've recently launched a success story with Minitab, a leading software vendor, and Minitab are so obsessed with the quality of their product that their unit test and integration test took them 11 hours to run as part of their CICD build. So they have this huge unit test, integration test asset, and they invested and they filled all the technical gap, and now it takes them 11 hours. So it's counter agile and CI/CD release automation kind of trend. So, and this resulted in very long build cycles, delayed feedback to developers, productivity loss, you name it. And having this amazing test asset, that's something you still want to use. So the way that they tackled it is they transformed to the cloud, and they added Incredibuild cloud scaling offering to their Azure DevOps pipelines. And they were able to reduce their test times from 11 hours down to 11 minutes, while also reducing their cloud infrastructure costs. So you're speaking about moving an 11-hour build cycle and dev wait time down to 11 minutes. And that's exactly what all these trends are pushing for. Super fast iterations that drive better quality, time to market, customer and developer satisfaction. And that's what our customers and everyone in dev are looking for. And that's where I think we can have this kind of alignment between these two. And connecting that to the shift left trend, I think that, of course, shift left, we're speaking about shift left usually in testing. Another use case of something which is very similar to that, you're looking at NCR with unit test of 15 minutes, okay? And with Incredibuild, they were able to distribute that and reduce this test time to 1 minute. And when you reduce your test time to 1 minute, and every developer can have unlimited core power to run all these unit tests in 1 minute, you can shift left. And instead of running these unit tests as part of the CI/CD, now every developer in NCR is running these unit tests before committing his code. This means that these developers are getting much faster feedback of their unit test, less than a minute. And another value that it gives is that the CI/CD builds now are almost not failing, because usually they fail on the unit test and integration test. If you can shift them left, then the CI/CD builds will fail less frequently. This means less time for the release manager and everyone looking at who broke the build. And I think this is where we are looking to move the industry into. And that's where our customers are taking us as well.
All right, who wants to jump in next? Let's see here.
Yeah, me, for example.
Sure.
I agree with Dori that build times is probably the most critical thing there. We C++ developers, we have a big hope here. Since C++20, we have now C++ modules, and I think that will be a game changer in build times. In the midterm, there is solid proof that in the short term it's difficult to improve build times with modules, but I think that we will eventually be there, and this is an area that probably we are not talking enough, but build systems will play an important role here. Also, as a firm believer in this, this is what we are trying to solve. In Conan, basically, we are managing the binaries. At least we are trying to achieve build avoidance. So if you can build all your binaries for any configuration, any platform that you are building for, including embedded, cross-building, whatever, and you can store those binaries and use them in an easy way, and in the same way for platforms, then you are saving a lot of time of building. And then this time is something that you will be able to use for all that we have been talking before, like the shift left and testing and all that stuff. And this is our proposal. This is what I'm mainly working in, is package management using binaries to build avoidance and provide more times for developers and CIs.
So Diego, I think that one of the things that we learn from our customers is the first thing, they usually come to us to accelerate their C++ builds. And we do that. But once they do that and accelerate the C++ build, for example, from 15 minutes to 1 minute, now the next thing they tell us, now the unit test take time, okay? So now the unit test is a bottleneck, it takes 10 minutes. And now they need to accelerate that as well. And once they do that, it's the integration test, and then the API test, and then the code analysis, and then the packaging and the code obfuscation. So every time you accelerate something, you have the next thing in line, as a bottleneck, serving as a bottleneck. And when we're looking at a trend, there are going to be just more and more bottlenecks. And I think that compilation time is just one thing, and models will address some of it, I believe. But I think that the bottleneck will just move further down the line, and we'll still struggle with build times, test times, code analysis times, and all these things that we want to have in the shift left. Yeah.
You remove a bottleneck, and there is another bottleneck after that, waiting for you. That's life.
Yeah. So we'll always have things to work on.
Thanks, Scott.
Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, I can. So yeah, along the same lines that Dori and Diego were saying, build time, obviously it becomes a large problem as code starts getting inflated. And on the Visual Studio side of things, we do a lot of work trying to always improve build times, and always people still want things faster. That's just the way it goes. But we recently did do a lot of work specifically on improving link times, because we're talking about bottlenecks. Link time is a big bottleneck for a lot of people doing builds, like big game studios and things like that we talk to. So we've done a lot of work, and some game studios that we work closely with have seen anywhere from like a 5 to 18x improvement in their link time. So that's been awesome. And then in Visual Studio as well, we have Incredibuild, being like you can install it in the installer itself. It ships with Visual Studio, and so that's another awesome way to accelerate builds. And then Diego mentioned a bit on package management, so I want to touch on that too, because that also, some parts of that tie into build as well. So we see a trend towards the adoption of these cross-platform open source package management solutions like Conan and like VC Package. And I don't work on the VC Package team, but my colleagues do, and I know that they are working on like a suite of features towards enterprise developers and things like that, where they're doing binary caching, which I think is what Diego was talking a bit about, where you can like avoid builds. So that's awesome. Binary caching, versioning, registries, and manifest files. So package management is definitely something that is still being worked on. People are trying to solve it. It's awesome. And I think the trend towards cross-platform and open source is really great in that area. And then Dori mentioned a bit about scaling, I think, earlier in this webinar. And one of the awesome things about having a remote, like cloud-hosted environment is that you're able to scale those cores or the RAM or the power of those machines as needed on your code base. So if your code base starts to scale up, you can scale up the SKU of whatever cloud machine you're using. So whether you're using CodeSpaces or some other type of online cloud-hosted developer environment, being able to sort of have a dial where if you need more power, you can scale up, or if you need less, you can scale it back down and pay less money. That's something that I think we should hopefully be able to see as code starts to get inflated and people want to continue to stay agile.
I'll just drop in. I totally agree with everything. I'm seeing the same thing with our customer base. And, one of the other things that we didn't really talk too much about, besides, obviously trying to go faster with build avoidance and all that, is cost, right? Not just cost of people's time and the cost of taking longer to get a release out the door or releasing less content. But there's also, certainly we see in the semiconductor space, again, massive, amounts of files, massive data that gets generated, is, reuse and build avoidance also has a big cost element, because there's some very exotic compilers and renderers, et cetera, that people have to license in order to create these builds. And not only do you want to try to reuse to save time or avoid to save the rebuild execution time, but also to limit the amount of licensing you need to expend to cover these different use cases, right? Again, some of these very exotic compilers and renderers. So, people are always, in today's world, and it's kind of been true forever, but people are trying to gain every competitive advantage they can, and that is all about going faster and saving money. So everything around IP asset reuse and build avoidance, we're looking critically at that, with our product offerings and having some great success with our customers, as well as the folks on this call. I think it's a very interesting trend that's going to continue to go on.
Have we lost our moderator?
Yes, we lost the moderator.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry,
here
guys.
it is.
Yeah, I was just mesmerized by that conversation. I just lost my thought. So right now, I wanted to ask the next following question. So thinking about everything we just, all the discussions that we just had around where we're going to be in 5 years, shifting left, speed, time to market being very important for us. I wanted to ask, what are your main priorities preparing for the future trends in C++ working environment? And Brad, if you can kick us off, that'd be great.
The future trends. So are you asking as for us as Perforce?
Yeah, as you guys.
Yeah, sure. So again, partnering with folks that are on this call, right? Tying these systems together with the trends as far as it relates, again, especially in the game development environment and virtual production environment, with the trend towards moving to the cloud and federating your work across the globe. We are focusing heavily on packaging efforts. We've always supported the cloud, and we're cloud neutral, but packaging efforts, integration efforts, making it easier for our customers to one-click deploy the various tools that we have in our portfolio, just to make it easier for them to get up and running, to deal with people that are working remote, to deal with distributed teams. We're a big part of transforming the virtual production industry, right? The gaming technologies, including C++, gaming engine development, moving into digital media, right, et cetera. So again, when you think around the environments that we're going after specifically, it's all around scale. Lots of files, large files, lots of people, globally distributed development. So how do we make it easier for our customers to deploy hybrid environments on-prem, in the cloud, from a server infrastructure perspective, replication of data, handling all these multiple geographic locations of development centers, including people working at their desk at their house, but doing it in a way to handle all of these massive scale challenges. That's what we're laser focused on, and really taking a more proactive adoption of cloud enablement to help our customers who might not yet be familiar with how to do that. Some of our customers, they're experts. They have the infrastructure. They know how to do it. Other people are trying to make that transition, and so we're focused on how we help them. We're focused on how we help, again, with reuse of assets to save them time, save them money, and that's really what's leading our development. Again, partner with people like Incredibuild to help facilitate a nice seamless workflow for the C++ developers out there.
Thanks, Brad. Diego, anyone else?
Yeah, as we saw, for me, for Conan and JFrog in this sense, our main priority is basically improving the integration with the build systems. Because in C++, we have this kind of weird situation that we have a build system or meta build system that is called CMake, that we all love and hate, or hate and love, depends on who. And something might change. Something needs to change to adopt C++ modules. And it is possible that there will be a space for changing build systems, new tools there. So anything that is coming, we need to be prepared. And in this sense, we are preparing all of our product and our infrastructure and everything to easily integrate any other tool and any possible change in the build systems. Also, isolating, because Conan integrates with all the systems. We integrate with Visual Studio, for example, Microsoft natively without using CMake at all. Okay, so you can create packages with Visual Studio and consume them with CMake and vice versa. So we need to keep working on this integration to be prepared for anything that the build system vendors and compilers bring to us as a result of changes and improvements in the ecosystem.
Thank you for that.
So when I'm looking at our priorities, of course, Incredibuild is all about performance. And I believe that performance is still going to be the critical part of companies. And when looking at the recent survey that I mentioned, it's more than 40% of C++ developers speak about how compilation time, build times are hindering, it's the main pain point. And another 42% saying that's the minor pain point, but still a main pain point. So I think that performance is still there, and I think that the world will still demand innovation and premier customer satisfaction that requires, us to iterate very, very fast. And that's our main priority. We will continue to be the down to earth, faster performance. That's what we're investing at. And I see a lot of companies now. It's a trend, of companies riding the agile trend and speak about faster cycles and faster releases. But most of these solutions actually address the automation part of the CICD. And by addressing the automation part, it makes the CICD cycle faster. Incredibuild is really about making things faster. The same processes you're running, the same tools you're running, just faster. And our unique virtualization technology allow us to do that and provide this dramatic boost to performance, not only to compilation, but to dozens of other existing tools and processes, and in a seamless manner. So because, as I said before, once you tackle the compilation problem, you'll have the testing problem, and then the code analysis, etc. So you need a single platform that will allow you to accelerate everything that you have that's compute intensive, and that's what our customers are doing with us. So that's our main focus. The new acceleration technologies we're currently working on are really dramatic and exciting. Stay tuned. So our main priority is to continue to offer the best of possible performance across organization entire tool chain, and making anything slow super fast and very seamlessly. And that's important. You don't need to do anything to change anything, just make it run faster. And that's what we are focusing on. Right.
Yeah, Dori, the last thing we want to do is go into some legacy code and try to change something and break that. So it's definitely, the seamlessness is great. Now, just to be cautious of time, just have a couple of questions. We have a lot of questions actually coming in. Just wanted to touch on a couple of them. If we don't get to your question, then we will try to follow up with you afterwards. So thank you very much. It's been a lively chat room, which is always fun. So the first one is for Nick. Nick, do you see VS Code replacing Visual Studio in the future? And if not, would it remain what would be the main differences between the two?
That's a good question. So right now, which is pretty much all I can speak to, is our recommendation is if you're doing Windows development, you should use Visual Studio. If you're on Mac or Linux, then VS Code is obviously what we would recommend using, because you can't use Visual Studio on it. But if you're on Windows, you should be using Visual Studio. It has higher fidelity capabilities, and you're able to still do things like targeting Linux from Visual Studio on Windows. We have WSL support. You can sort of, like what I was saying before with targeting Linux VMs, you're able to do that. And it has a really rich debugging experience. So that's our guidance right now. If you're on Windows, Visual Studio, otherwise VS Code.
Cool, thanks. And this one's for Brad. You recently acquired Testcraft, codeless and AI-based web application test generation and maintenance. When do you foresee the availability of mature AI technology for C++ code test and generation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so it's, when you look at the test challenge, right, you can never completely cover everything, right? I don't care if that's your initiative, that's what you shoot for, but there's just a million billion different possibilities. So the idea is you want to focus on, building out a test framework that supports your critical use cases that can give you the confidence you need to ship your products. What typically blocks people, and again, I'm getting to the Testcraft acquisition, what typically blocks people is, again, the knowledge and the skill set to create tests, right, to create quality tests, and then having a poor test framework. The Testcraft acquisition solves those problems because it gives people the ability to ramp very quickly and visually create the tests that they need to create in a hurry. So it gets people over that testing creation gap, and it creates very reliable, robust tests. So that's solving that problem. Where the AI comes in, and what's something that we've been talking about for quite a while, is I change over time as these test runs happen. And so right now, Testcraft is targeted to that Perfecto platform. So web applications, mobile applications, is taking that AI and saying, okay, and this does apply to the C++ world as well. As you've built up a test history suite over time, and you've studied and analyzed the test results, and you've tied that to your version control, like in Helix Core, right? And you started to learn, you can start to build up some machine learning around this area of the code tends to have these kinds of defects. These kinds of tests will fail. So you quickly will start to build up data where, and that's the goal with the AI, is to say, hey, I got to run CI, right? I got to keep that window short. Or we need to get a critical patch out to a customer. If I change this part of the code, what tests do I need to run, right? Being able to bridge that gap and be able to have smart testing analytics on what you should test, that goes across every programming language in the world, right? So it's really a matter of, regardless of what you're using for a testing platform, is starting to build up and learn and marry the what is changed to what the impact of that change was, because it could come in areas that are unforeseen. You might be touching an API, but that might break the UI, right? So you need to really start to build that connection between the code that's changed and the impact that will have on your test results. So that's really where the opportunity is. And there's a lot of work being done, not just with us in the industry as well, trying to help bridge that gap. But that's where I see the trend going, smarter testing based on those results.
Excellent, Brad. Thank you so much. Dori, you said there's a question for Incredibuild.
There were two questions I could see here. One is asking which CI/CD platform can we support, specifically on Spinnaker, and another one, cloud platforms that Incredibuild support, whether we support non-common cloud platforms. So I'll start with the cloud. Incredibuild can automatically scale you up and down and provision and deprovision cloud hosts for you, even spot instances, which dramatically, our customer report reducing more than 30% of their infrastructure costs just by using Incredibuild, ability to scale smartly and use spot instances. So this technology is currently offered only in Azure and AWS, the smart spinning up and down of virtual machines and containers according to your dynamic demand and the use of spot instances, etc. That's currently, but it's going to come to additional cloud vendors as well. But essentially, you can take Incredibuild as you take it and set it up on premise and use all the computers you have, and you can use the idle CPU cycles of all these machines that are part of your on-premise. You can do the same thing for any cloud environment. So any connected environment, whether it's on-premise, in the cloud, wherever it is, you can install Incredibuild your way and make sure that Incredibuild can use additional CPU cycles from connected machines. Actually, you can even scale from on-premise to the cloud. And we also have customers that met the cost, the cloud cost, and are trying to benefit as much as possible from all the cloud services of the CI/CD. But instead of scaling in the cloud, they scale back on-premise in order to save costs to their own data center. So they have the Jenkins nodes in the cloud, but all the distribution of Incredibuild's compute to additional cores is being brought back on-premise just for cost reduction. So it's just a matter of cost performance, and every company has its own. Regarding the CI/CD question, essentially Incredibuild can support any CI/CD platforms. We are actually interested in what the CI/CD is running. So if it's running compilation or tests or other stuff, the CI/CD platform itself is we are agnostic to this. So you can use Incredibuild with every CI/CD platform, and that's what our customers are doing with us.
Okay, thank you so much. Looking at the time, that was fun, guys. I appreciate it. That concludes our time for today. And for our next virtual roundtable, we hope to focus on gaming. But we really would appreciate if you guys can give us more topics, which would be great. And please, at the end, we have a survey for you guys to fill out, because again, this really helps us to try to fine tune the topics and the type of speakers and companies that we can bring to our future virtual roundtables. Just to finish off, tip this off with the polls that we had here. We asked at the beginning, what % of the development is in your organization is C++? And we see that 60% and more, 53% said 60% and more, 21% is 0 to 10%, 21% 20 to 40%, and 24% is 50%. Guys, quick question, just for the quick roundtable. Let's do a speed answer. Does that surprise you? Yes or no? So again, What percentage of the development in your organization is C++? 53% said 60% and more. So more than half. Does that surprise you guys? Do you guys, nope, not at all. Why not?
Nope.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Okay, great. Thank you for that, everyone. And again, thank you so much to our panel members for joining us. Thank you for your time and hope to see you on the next virtual roundtable. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter to find out when. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure.